And in fact, it's extremely detrimental to someone way over here in the freeze spectrum. So I just want to chat about that for a minute because I'm a living example of using meditation. Now, I've been meditating since I was 12. I'm 55, so that's 40 plus years of a fanatical meditation practice. Studied with monks, the whole dive. I used it unknowingly to compound my maladaptive freeze response. Here's how.
Collective Insights is a voyage through topics and technologies revolutionizing human well-being. Groundbreaking approaches for a better world and a better life await you. Welcome to Collective Insights.
Hi, I'm Dr. Greg Kelly, VP of Product Development at Qualia. Our podcast often delves into topics related to mental well-being because issues like brain fog, mental exhaustion, and supporting long-term brain health are common concerns. That's why we make Qualia Mind. Our new and improved Qualia Mind formula required thousands of research hours, reviewing hundreds of ingredients until we identified 32 vegan, non-GMO brain nutrients and compounds that together form the ultimate blend for brain health. From focus, memory, mood, the drive to get things done, Qualia Mind supports everything you need to have a thriving mindset. We think you'll notice the brain-nourishing difference fast, and that you'll appreciate its support for healthy brain aging years down the road. To try Qualia Mind risk-free for 100 days, go to qualialife.com/mind and use code MIND for an additional 15% off your order. That's qualialife.com/mind to experience the ultimate blend for brain health. Hi, this is Dr. Greg. Today we have Lisa Wimberger, the founder of the Neurosculpting Institute and co-founder of the Neuropraxis app. She holds a master's degree in education, a foundation certificate in neuroleadership, and certificates in medical neuroscience, visual perception, and the brain and neurobiology. She's a 7-time author of neuroplasticity and stress management books, including New Beliefs, New Brain, Free Yourself from Stress and Fear, and Neurosculpting, a whole brain approach to heal trauma, rewrite limiting beliefs, and find wholeness. Her business portfolio includes Kama App, Kids EQ, and consultative services for other wellness tech companies. She personally runs multiple companies and has over 45 international neurosculpting licensees. Lisa still runs a private meditation coaching practice, teaching clients who suffer from emotional blocks, stress disorders, and self-imposed limitations. She's a keynote speaker and a faculty member at Kripalu Yoga and Meditation Center, the Law Enforcement Survival Institute, Omega Institute, Shift Network, Gaily Om, and 1440 Multiversity. And just for listeners, I got to hear Lisa speak at an event called Summit Baja in November 2024 and was blown away. So Lisa, I'm thrilled to have you as a guest today.
It's so great. I'm so looking forward to this conversation based on our mutual love of all things neuroplasticity.
Yeah. I know it's near and dear to our hearts and many of our listeners. So I think for those of you that are with us today, you're going to learn some really cool things about the brain and some nice techniques to start rewiring yours. So with that, one of the things that I really appreciated when I got to hear you at the live Summit Baja event was really your presence on stage and, your ability to communicate with the audience. And you started that with a little bit about your background. I would love if you could start here the same way.
Yeah, it's kind of surreal when I describe my life because it doesn't feel real to me, but it is quite real. I grew up very much into like meditation and metaphysics, having no idea how it would shape me. And then when I was 15 on my birthday, I was hit by lightning in the base of the spine. It actually came out through the metal door handle I was leaning against. So it came out through me, through the base of the spine. And that changed my life from that day forward, right? So it started a cascade of really, really horrific vasovagal seizures, seizure disorder that went undiagnosed for decades. It compounded my already dissociative nature. It compounded my body and nervous system's need to escape and anesthetize. And so from that point forward, I got really sick in my body and really dissociated in my mind, which gifted me lots of things, right? It gifted me my capacity to and desire to understand the nervous system so I could eventually fix the thing that was killing me. It gifted me an ability to be a keen observer of life and people. And then it gifted me all the shadows that come with that, which is a really dissociative view of my own world, escapism, addiction to meditation as a coping, the whole spectrum. But what it ultimately landed me at was the necessity to understand my nervous system as a threading point between spiritual fulfillment, emotional wellness, mental well-being, and physical capacity. All of that had to be sutured together through neuroscience. I never would have gone there unless that lightning strike completely fried my nervous system and I had to deal with these vicious seizures. So it was a gift in the long run, but very surreal.
Yeah, I know you went into, some other details in your books, which I'll leave readers to discover on their own. Highly recommend the books, by the way, that I read as part of the bio. Before we jump any further, I'm sure many listeners know what you mean by dissociative or think they do, but can you share exactly what you mean by that?
Yeah. So we have lots of ways to cope with stress. One of them is to get very embodied and feel aggravated, aggressive, rage, that fight feeling. That's embodied. Dissociative is part of the stress coping spectrum, which is a bit of withdraw, a bit of freeze, a bit of feeling numb, anesthetizing, and really disconnecting from your body. So from the neck up, very heady, very analytical, very escapist. From the body down, you really need the body to just like knock you over for you to listen to it. And dissociative capacity is life preserving to a certain degree. And then it's also quite addictive in a very maladaptive degree. And so I was in the spectrum of like, just let me be numb for all of this and I'll be fine.
When I think that was probably my main coping mechanism right until some point in my life. For listeners, I grew up in a big Irish Catholic family. I had 5 brothers and sisters. I would have probably been the one that maybe innately had the most like empathy software installed, for a lack of a better way to describe it. And so it wasn't a great setting for someone with a lot of empathy. And so as by for sure middle school, I would have related to a song by Simon and Garfunkel that the lyrics went something like, I'm a rock, I'm an island, I touch no one touches me. Like I could, in the chaos of a storm, be completely unflapped because I disassociated. And, that's how I would relate to what you're sharing, that it was, my way of coping with stress that I didn't want to embody.
Can I ask you a question about that? Because this was true for me. When you're really profoundly dissociated, it can look very grounded. It can look very calm. It could look very productive during crisis. Was that what people thought of you?
Yeah. I would have always been the one that other people would share
Yeah.
their stress with because I would appear unflappable.
Yes.
But then because I was ignoring what was going on in my
100%.
body. And I love that term embodied. Like now I spend my main way I approach meditation is an embodied meditation.
Yes.
And instead of like escaping, because I'm really good at
Yeah. Escaping is it's a skill. It's an adaptable skill, an adaptive skill, I should say. But yeah, when you just use it as the only one, it just creates all sorts of downstream problems in life and in the nervous system.
Yeah, and what I would have, witnessed in some of my then personal relationships, when I would disassociate, the other person would get more angry or irritated because they needed to provoke a reaction, or didn't need to, but they weren't getting the response they wanted, and their nervous system was also imbalanced. I think it was when Lisa Feldman Barrett episodes we had, she said something like, the best thing for our nervous system is other human beings, and the worst thing for our nervous system can also be other human beings.
Completely. And for me, I really relate to that because for me, when I would be excessively dissociated, like you said, the other person would get very agitated and push. And then when you push a dissociated person to a level of embodiment, what you get is years worth of ignored embodiment, and it's extremely explosive. Like I remember in my 20s, there was no middle ground. It was 0 to 60, right? It was like unflappable, to use your term, all the way up to threshold of provocation, and then I would put my fist through a wall. I have punched holes in walls. I can't even tell you how many times in my early 20s, and then would spiral back out of shame back into deep, deep shutdown. So it was this like extreme pendulum swing, and I had no idea how to find homeostasis from either end of that until the neuroscience, really, until I was forced to.
Oh, and I would say the same. Like the universe has a way of forcing things. One of the things I also enjoyed when I got to see you live was when you talked more about fight, flight, or freeze, because I think the freeze part is something in things I've read and people I've listened to that doesn't get nearly as much attention.
It doesn't get a lot of attention because it's socially acceptable behavior. So when I think of stress, I describe it linearly, even though it's not, right? But for simplicity, let's say homeostasis is middle space, where your body feels enough tone to be mobile if it needs to, enough relaxation to be resting if it doesn't have to do anything, enough focused awareness to be cognizant, and enough diffuse awareness to not be hypervigilant, right? That's what homeostasis can feel like. And for everyone, that's a different point, but let's call that middle. So when the stress comes, we're either going to go in an arousal direction to adapt to a change in the environment, or a shutdown direction to adapt. And those two are very, very different behaviorally. And we most associate a stress response socially by way of being able to observe it. And when we can identify someone is getting agitated, aggressive, their volume is raising, their body is tensing, they're pacing, they're getting red in the face, they're starting to yell, their face is animated, that's all really easy to identify. So we have spent so many decades identifying arousal stress response. So then we have anger management classes. We have traditional meditation. That is all the rage right now, meditation apps to calm a nervous system down. So we have addressed robustly the arousal adaptation response. We have ignored shutdown. Up until I would say the last 5 years, where now it's starting to get really good attention, because shutdown is quiet, it plays nice, it is not disruptive. So it looks like quiet. It looks like flat affect. It looks like a withdraw and an observation. It can look calm. It can look grounded. It can look unflappable. And then as it gets more and more shut down and internal, it can go to complete dissociation, which is, I have such an anesthetized experience of life that I am resilient to pain. So even pain cannot move you when you're extremely dissociated. And so a lot of really dissociated people have super high pain tolerance. And so our bodies then need to scream louder and louder to get us to shift out of that state. But then when you get really, really extreme parasympathetic shutdown, you're going to pass out. You're going to, in my case, I'm, Dr. Stephen Porges' extreme example of seizure. You can access the play dead option, which is all the way over here in the shutdown spectrum. And when you play dead, which is a coping mechanism to large amounts of stress, in theory, if you were a mammal with a small brain, that shutdown would be very beneficial. Your brain and your heart would slow down and stop. Your brain would be deoxygenated for just a short amount of time, but you would look dead, so the predator would walk away. And then a mammal with a small brain would recalibrate, the heart would kick back in, and you'd be fine. Mammals with large brains, like humans, cannot sustain oxygen deprivation for the same amount of time as a bird. So when we seize, in a play dead option, it's extremely damaging to the brain. It's extremely damaging to the way the nervous system habituates to that being the thing it wants to do again and again and again to get you out of stress. And that takes advantage of the vagus nerve's capacity to regulate brain, heart in response to stress. And that's all the way over here. But it is quiet and it's socially acceptable. So all of us who freeze often get ignored. And so I really value bringing awareness to this spectrum because the tools you choose to come back from those opposite responses are not the same. And I'm going to just pause for a minute because I'm about to go on a meditation soapbox rant. So I'll just hold it.
I really appreciate it for listeners. When Lisa was on the stage at Summit Baja, she kind of moved to different parts of the stage to actually almost allow us to start to embody even these extremes that she's speaking about. I think they're super important. And as she said, undershared. And our goal today was to share both, about them. So you're more aware, but then, what she's going to go into next, why certain techniques that sound super cool may not be the best fit in the moment, depending on where you are on that arousal.
Yeah. So I think many of us, if not the majority of us, would agree if we were told meditation's a really good thing. Most of us would say, yeah, I know that by experience, or yes, I've heard that. And certainly if you're on social media, meditation is like now second nature. It's like the thing to do. And in fact, it's extremely detrimental to someone way over here in the freeze spectrum. So I just want to chat about that for a minute because I'm a living example of using meditation. Now, I've been meditating since I was 12. I'm 55, so that's 40 plus years of a fanatical meditation practice. Studied with monks, the whole dive. I used it unknowingly to compound my maladaptive freeze response. Here's how. When you are embodied and aroused as your stress response, all the way over into like aggression and anger and rage, your nervous system is in like a sympathetic state of agitation. It's excitation. So a calm down approach makes perfect sense. That's when you would reach for all of your meditation apps, your meditation practice, your let it go practice, because that is going to just put the brakes on the gas and you're too gassed at that point. When you are in a shutdown response, think physiologically for a minute. Your heart rate is decelerated. Your oxygenation in the brain is compromised. Your gut is not working. You are going in a very, very depressed situation in terms of metabolic output, oxygen use. So the last thing you want to do is calm down because your body is already going in the mechanical direction of that. Emotionally, maybe not. Your anxiety might be high, but your body's going into shutdown. So for you in shutdown to get back to a state of balance between focused arousal and calm, you have to come backwards. You have to take your foot off the brake and put it on the gas, just enough. And that is the opposite of calm down meditation. I was taught TM. I was trained in Ascension, which is a version of TM, and I kept trying to calm down, having no idea that my bradycardia, my super low blood pressure, my oxygen-deprived brain was getting worse. So what I discovered, when you are in freeze, it is not about calming down. Put those meditation apps aside and do an embodiment practice, which is going to be anything physical, and we can chat about those in a little bit, or a neuroplasticity meditation practice, which is absolutely not designed to calm you down as the main goal. It is designed to recruit just enough arousal attention so you can direct it towards homeostasis. So there's a big difference between neuroplasticity meditations, of which there are very few, if not, I might be the only one, who has an actual neuroplasticity meditation protocol. There's lots of bodies of education, great ones, but I don't know of any other official meditation protocols that are purely neuroplasticity governed. But it was a game changer for my body. And I realized that I had to use traditional relaxation meditation as a tool for the right circumstances. And often I was not in that circumstance.
I know when I heard you give that description at Summit, one of the things that occurred to me, and I'm just going to go off on a slight tangent, but then we'll come back, is that when it comes to focus, because the original product, Qualia Mind, was very lasered on let's help people get focused better. And our mindset was, okay, well, what's preventing people from being focused? And on the one hand, you had people that were under aroused that needed some degree of stimulation to get there, right? So that's them. And other, it was almost a brain that was too much going on, right? Like, say, frantic, more like going on internally, and that they need to be then moved back from the other direction. And that Qualia Mind's goal was somewhat ambitious, but no matter where you are, either through adaptogens or things like calm energy, things like a caffeine theanine stack, let's try to bring anyone back towards that homeostasis point. And it was one of the reasons why when I heard you share this, I'm like, oh, she is brilliant. This is like so important. More people need to hear this.
You have to dial into the Goldilocks spot of focused attention. And like you said, well, first of all, I love that the Qualia approach is to the adaptogen approach, which is give you what you need in the moment to get where you are in that Goldilocks spot. And sometimes that means dialing down and sometimes that means dialing up. But the way I like to think about it is, for us old school people who had radios with dials in our cars, right? You had to turn the dial and scroll through static to find the station. And then you would find the periphery of the station and it would come through, but it would be staticky. And then you'd land right in the middle. And that was the sweet spot of reception. When I think about the Goldilocks spot of focused attention, it is that sweet spot where it is not hypervigilant focus. And it is not so diffuse that I drift off into other brain states where I'm just in pure receptivity. It is that spot where that harmony of like learning neurotransmitters, where dopamine is just enough to minimize the distractions. Norepinephrine is just enough to lock you onto a target. Acetylcholine is just enough to cause you to value this and remember it. And that sweet spot puts you in a heightened state of neuroplasticity that feels to me, from my personal experience, neither too aroused nor so drifting off into observation witness mode that I don't feel my body anymore. And I think each person has to find that spot, but with a practice like neurosculpting, where we guide you through, in a brain induction, we help you find that sweet spot within 3 to 5 minutes of the meditation, where you're like, oh, there it is. There's the dial. And that's been a game changer for me, because I was taught that bringing focus into a meditation was the counter of what I was supposed to do. I was supposed to just sit back and watch. Well, I was already masterful at sitting back and watching my life. I didn't need help to be in witness mode. Dissociative people live there. We need help finding the Goldilocks spot of that radio station so we can hear the information. Yeah, I think for me, it's exciting to see an approach to supplements that are also about what is the Goldilocks space.
Well, thank you. Well, one of the things I've seen, I don't have anywhere near the experience you have with meditation, but I've done a bit, taught yoga way back in my pre-naturopathic and early naturopathic. As a matter of fact, the style that I originally took was Kripalu. So it's interesting that you're connected with them. And why that appealed to me was the flow, the movement. Like, I needed, maybe similar to you, like, it's easy for my brain to do nothing, and something more active that would cause me to focus, and movement was that. Because one of the things I've seen with at least some meditators, and probably 2 decades ago or more when I visited the Institute of Heart Math, they had said at the time that where they saw two populations that surprised them with their heart rate variability being less plastic than they expected were long-term meditators and long-term people that did basically long distance type of running, where they were running at the same cadence. And my sense from that point was that in both of those, there's a zoning out that the brain often does. And then we're training for a limited amount of plasticity, where our goal should always be, in my sense, like, that's great. And that shouldn't be all we do.
Absolutely. So in terms of heart rate variability, I know that our audiences know what that means, but for anyone who doesn't, when your heart rate variability is low, that means you have a minimized capacity for your heart rate to be adaptable in how fast it speeds up and how fast it slows down. So if you are less adaptable in your heart's capacity to adapt to the moment, then you're rigid. If your heart rate variability, it has high tone, that means you can escalate and de-escalate quicker. So you're more adaptable to respond to the needs of the environment. And dissociative people generally have low heart rate variability, low vagal tone, which is rigidity. That means anything that pushes me out of my very small comfort zone will not be something I can adapt to. Therefore, I better shut down. And then the more I shut down, the smaller my window of tolerance becomes. So now I have a very small world around me that is considered safe to my nervous system. Anything outside of that is going to challenge my rigid vagal tone, and I'm going to have to shut down. And so when we zone out, or when we stay in a very small window of like go, 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 right? That's my whole definition of life. We're going to get rigid. So it is as much about the extreme arousal as it is about the extreme rest, right? All plasticity requires the same thing that is expressed at cellular, mental, emotional levels, right? Which is how effortlessly, or let me say it this way, how energy efficiently and quickly can we adapt the body to the needs of the environment, the mental body, emotional body, metabolic body, physical body. And all of those bodies are basically enacting the same dynamic, which is we need less rigidity, more adaptability at will, so that we can apply that in the moment. And that's part of the problem is we often don't know how to get in and tinker with our adaptable capacity. We just think we're born with it, or this is just who I am. I remember I grew up Sicilian, and I remember in my early 20s when I would punch holes in walls, I would say, well, that's my Sicilian nature coming out. That's just how we are. That's how my mother was. Although she loved us more than a human could love anyone. She was so expressive. She also was that expressive with her anger. And so, but that's just being Sicilian. Well, that wasn't true. That's how I was because I didn't learn how to tinker with my own nervous system's completely teachable capacity for adaptation.
I'm going to use your example and then throw back to mine earlier, which was I'm a rock, I'm an island, no one touches me type of thing, as examples of storytelling. Because a big part of what I took away from both of your books and from several conversations we've had the opportunity to share is the importance of being good storytellers and how our stories often impact everything so far that we've been talking about. Can you kind of share a little bit about that? I know one of the things in your book was that viral video that I remember doing years ago where I didn't see the gorilla part through. So,
that gorilla video has been one of the most remarkable teaching tools. So, I mean, in a nutshell, we are experiencing life from our internal expectations of what we're going to experience, not actually from what's happening around us. So the gorilla video that you're talking about is this great video, and I used to show it when I would teach in the police agencies. I would show it to all the officers who pride themselves on their capacity for hypervigilant situational awareness. They're not going to miss anything about assessing a scene, right? So if ever there was an audience that should have seen the gorilla in the video, it should be that one. Well, it's a scene. You're instructed to watch this basketball game, and you're given a task. Count how many times the team in the white shirts passes the ball. And so you now have a focused awareness to a very narrow expectation. So when you look at this, your narrow internal expectation is the set of all things that equal basketball. I should see a referee, I should see teams, I should see a ball, I should hear sneakers on a court, I should see maybe people watching, I should see a basket. What I don't allow for is seeing anything outside my set of expectations. And so in the middle of this video, a man in a gorilla suit comes out into the middle of the court, dances around, bangs his chest like 9 times. He's out there for a good amount of time and then dances off. I would say, guesstimating out of the thousands of officers I've shown that to, 5% see the gorilla the first time. Then what I do is I don't tell them there was a gorilla yet. I let the 5% who have seen it look a little confused. And then I say, now I'm going to show you a video where something completely unexpected happens. I actually show them the exact same video, but now their internal set of expectations expands beyond basketball game. Now they are expecting something different. Now they all see the gorilla. So what I love about neuroscience, about the body, and I also feel it's our major human pain point, is the understanding that I am creating my reality from the inside out in all moments. My retina is still picking up all of the photons in my field of vision, but it is my expectation of what I should be seeing that determines how I interpret my field of vision. It literally will delete out in the pathway from the primary visual cortex back through the thalamus, back to the front of the brain for analysis. It will delete out anything that did not fit my conscious and subconscious expectation. And this is where we get stuck, is that it is the subconscious expectations that are defining what we see, feel, experience, and hear, and smell, and touch in life, as though that is reality, when in fact it's just an iteration and a sliver, and there's just a whole field more that we are not aware of, that we could be aware of if we had our handle on how to make conscious and subconscious congruent. The reason we don't make them congruent is because our nervous system is rarely adaptable enough to deal with that discrepancy. So it all comes full circle. You learn about making the nervous system adaptable. You will be able to start to excavate the subconscious patterns and find a way to make them congruent with the conscious. And when that happens, your whole life changes.
We're going to go back to a few techniques in like 2 or 3 minutes. There's 2 quotes I just had earmarked from your book, New Beliefs, New Brains, that I just wanted to read briefly and then get you to expand on. So the first one, this one was from your book, Neurosculpting. And it's, the truth is we may never know consciously the stories that guide our behavior, but that's not a hindrance to healing, because neuroplasticity does not rely on discovering the why. That's the first one. And the second is from New Beliefs, New Brain. And it says, so for me, the accuracy of the mental imagery is irrelevant. What's extremely relevant is that I allowed emotional associations to finally bubble up, then dissipate, so they no longer lived inside me. And both of those so resonate with my own healing experience. So I thought those would be great things to share a little bit more about.
Yeah, as a heady observer of life who didn't want to feel my body from the neck down, I gained very keen sense of analysis and awareness. And I think anyone who's in the psychology field knows that when you have a client that comes in that can give you an analysis of their life better than you ever could, it's probably because they spent a lot of time witnessing and not always feeling. That was me, right? Able to analyze. But the fascinating thing about what's going on in the body is that the more we stay in that analysis, needing to understand the why, then needing to understand the why of the why, and then the history of that person and why they got to the why, we never get to the processing of the way the nervous system is relating to the situation. Our gift of adaptation comes through the body. So if we stay in the head about it, it becomes a labyrinth of invitation to a never-ending endpoint. When we go to, okay, I don't understand the why. I don't understand why I had, pre-verbal trauma, how a person could do that to me. I don't understand why. I don't understand why I deserved it. But I know where it is in my body. And even if I don't know the details of it, I know the thing that happens when that vast unknown story speaks. I know that my gut shuts down or my heart shuts down, or I know that I get that pain in my neck. If you can find the body's relationship to that story, regardless of how much information you have about that story, well, then you have a way in. And that way in circumvents the need for justification, the need for justice, the need for fairness. It circumvents the morals you might want to place on somebody. It circumvents victim mentality, and it goes right to what are you going to do about it? And so when you can reach the conversation of your body's response to the thing, well, then you have agency to shift it through all sorts of techniques, right? Neurosculpting, meditation, breathing, dance, exercise, right? You can pick from the toolbox because you know what tool you need. So I'll summarize it like this. If you want to screw something in, you need a screwdriver. Do you spend 5 days understanding how metals were created and that screw was fashioned in a factory? You don't need to know that. You don't even need to know where the screw was bought. You just need to know it's a screw that needs a screwdriver. And so that's kind of how I view the freedom and the liberation of not needing to know all the story, which makes neurosculpting, because it's our approach, a non-therapeutic approach, because we're not needing analysis to go there. However, the effect of neurosculpting can be extremely regulating, which can feel therapeutic.
Well, we've mentioned this term neurosculpting a lot, and I know what you mean by that since I read your books and got to hear you speak. So maybe just in a broad sense, describe what you mean by that to listeners.
Yeah, before I broke through my seizures, what I first recognized was I had a habituated stress response pattern in my nervous system, and it was causing me to have seizures. Okay, got it. Now what do I do about it? Meditation's not working. Well, here I'm learning about neuroplasticity, and I'm learning that there's a sequence that the brain hits that creates a Goldilocks capacity to get into my nervous system and edit habituated patterns. There's actually a sequence. And after taking all my neurosculpting classes, my neuroscience classes, what I realized was that sequence did not exist in an actual practice form. It was theoretical. And here I have meditation, missing the mark, and this sequence that I'm putting together that is supposedly going to land And I don't have a vehicle for theoretical information. So what I did was I took my meditation practice. I took the idea of guided creative visualization, and I said, well, what if I could induce my brain to this sequenced hierarchy of steps that would excite it enough, relax it enough, get it focused enough, get my body receptive enough so I could start making subconscious storyline congruent with conscious desires and goals for life. So I put 5 steps together and I delivered it to myself in a guided meditation format. And I did it in like 15, 20-minute experiences. And I was self-guiding because I was still playing with it. And I was doing this because my last seizure that I ever had was, my last few seizures were horrific. I flatlined in front of my daughter when she was 3, and that created really profound trauma for both of us. And the seizure after that, I was not breathing anymore on my own, and I had to be resuscitated on multiple occasions. So I knew I was at the edge, and I knew Western medicine said there's nothing you can do for this. I knew neuroplasticity was showing there might be something I could do about this. And so I was playing with this self-created protocol. And in this meditation experience, 15, 20-minute experience, I was rehearsing with high awareness and deep relaxation and high receptivity. I was rehearsing another response to stress that I hoped to habituate so that my subconscious habituation could match my conscious intention of let me stay alive. And I didn't know if this was going to work. And I did it for about 7 months, multiple times a week, between the very last seizure I had and the unknown time when I was going to have another one. And that unknown time arrived about 7 months after I was practicing this protocol, praying, Hail Marying, let me live, let me live. I was driving the car. I didn't know I was driving the car. I thought I was the passenger. My husband said I was driving. And I had a seizure halo aura. And I knew I was going to seize. And this protocol, this story I had been habituating to inside of this guided 5-step container I had been practicing kicked in. Now, the story I had been practicing to habituate to was when a seizure halo hit, I was not going to seize. I was going to punch, kick, fight, scream, bite. I practiced that mentally like a rehearsal inside my neurosculpting meditation for 7 months. Seizure halo comes, story kicks in on autopilot. I thought I was going to die, and suddenly my body is acting out the habituated script, which was I started punching, kicking, screaming. He grabbed the wheel, pulled the car over, and I went ballistic banshee, fully enacting this fight script I had a bit habituated to, and I didn't seize. And my body went from all the way over here in that shutdown phase. It went all the way past homeostasis, all the way into arousal explosion, which I had not really given myself permission to do in a very, very long time. And what happened was I stayed oxygenated, I didn't seize, and my body broke through decades of a pattern. And I realized after having neurogenic tremors for like 5 hours after that my entire nervous system was reset. And I knew I would never have another seizure again. And that was almost 20 years ago. And at that moment, I devoted my life to sharing this protocol, which I called neurosculpting. And so it feels like meditation. It is guided. And in the guidance, you are being moved through 5 sequential steps of neuroplastic recruitment so that we can get you in as efficiently, as potently as possible into your subconscious habituated patterns, tinker in a very gentle way, and train to that edit and get out. In a nutshell, that's what it is and where it came from.
Oh, wonderful. I know, especially your first book, the
New Beliefs, New Brain.
New Brains, there's lots of exercises. And there seemed to me to be a common theme in terms of the sequencing of it. And often it was start with a goal or intention, then, sit comfortably. I'll let you share. But there's a technique you often do to enhance neuroplasticity right out of the gate.
Yes. Yeah. So there's the sequencing is this. So inside of a 15-minute window, this is what we're going to do to sequence through. The first thing is we're going to spend 2 to 3 minutes calming the midbrain's need for hypervigilance. Now, what does that mean? It means we're not going to tell the brain or the person to calm down, because that doesn't work. What instead we're going to do is invite the person to focus on the things that we are generally wanting to know. Is life predictable? Is it consistent? Do I have situational comfort? Do I know where the bathroom is? Am I relatively having my needs met? If you can spend 2 to 3 minutes focusing on those very simple things, we will see a measurable decrease in hypervigilant stress. So what we're doing in the first 3 minutes is we're really bringing the midbrain into a quieter volume. From there, we move into step 2, which is let's activate the recruited focused attention in the front of the brain. And instead of saying focus, 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 that also doesn't work. What we get to say is let's feed the brain what it loves so that it gets really excited and engaged. Well, focused attention loves novelty, humor, wonder, and awe. So in minutes like 3 through 5 of the meditation, we're going to focus on literally bizarre, nonsensical things. I will guide you to imagine the silliest things, the Dr. Seuss kinds of things, so that in 5 minutes, we are reaching a Goldilocks space of neuroplasticity, meaning non-sleep deep rest combined with recruited focused attention. From there, we have induced a neuroplastic receptivity in brain and body. And now, game on, we have a stage to go dive into story or patterns in the nervous system that have been rigid before and entrained to. So we can then look at those with very particularly bilateral stimulation. The reason the guidance of the story part of neurosculpting is bilateral stimulation is because when we use both sides of our brains in an experience, the brain values that as neuroplastic gold. Oh, more real estate involved? This must be important. So we're extra highlighting to the nervous system the value of what we're doing. Additionally, when we're looking at a story, when I say story, a belief, a trauma, a stress, an experience, when we're looking at that, we also want to prevent a reliving. The last thing you want to do is relive something when your brain is highly neuroplastic, because that's called reinforcement. So in this step 3, where we're like diving into story, I am toggling the listener through bilateral stimulation because it also helps prevent a lateralized reliving of a situation. Einstein said you can't address a pattern or a problem from the same energy that created it. So that in essence, that's what we're doing with this bilateral stimulation. And I do that guiding it. The user just gets to listen to it. And the way I do it and the way our practitioners are taught to do it is we just engage semantic listening. We spell things in the meditation. We list words. We ask you to create definitions and lists of things. Your semantic brain is very excited about that. And then we invite a very abstract relationship, colors, textures, vibrations, sounds, abstraction, so that the symbolic brain really loves that. And so in that way, I'm guiding you effortlessly through heightened neuroplastic safe states while you are now looking at your stress pattern. And then steps 4 and 5 is we find where your body is relating to that in real time. And then we use mental imagery or even breathing to shift the body's response, which then starts to uncouple the habituated old response to the old story. We're uncoupling it in real time. And then we anchor into that uncoupling with a hand gesture, because also when we start to get the body involved in motion and movement, we enhance plasticity. And then at the end, step 5, we give it a name. to sort of like label it. And that 5-step sequence is packaged in a 15-minute experience. It's very playful, so the user doesn't know we're doing any of that. They're just hearing a story. But what we're doing is we're just escorting your brain most efficiently through the steps of highest neuroplastic engagement. Because if you're going to break a 40-year pattern, you don't have 40 more years to try to do that. And you don't need 40 more years when you are efficient. You need potency and efficiency. And so neurosculpting can get the job done very quickly because we're optimizing receptivity every single step of those 5 steps.
So I got to, sit through one of your exercises. So I'll just let the listeners at this point know that I've been thrilled to have Lisa here to share with you today. That, my sense is everyone listening would benefit from getting more direct access to what she has to offer. And I'm sure some of you have been listening thinking, I want that. So for those people, what's the next step?
Lots of things to get your feet wet. So if you go to neurosculpting.com, we've got a bunch of free meditations, bite-sized chunks so you can experience it. You can just go to our meditation page. We also have an incredible podcast channel called Neuropraxis, and that is a meditation-only podcast channel. So right now, between the 2 libraries we have there, we have probably about 70 neurosculpting meditations, everything from helping you rewrite and override physical chronic illness patterns that you've habituated to, all the way to mental wellness and happiness. Those are the 2 places where you will get the most direct, immediate experience. And then, of course, on the neurosculpting.com page, you can go to the Learn tab and you can find how to study with me in person, right? There's retreats, there's online classes, and there's private coaching, which I do.
Wonderful. Well, thank you again for taking time to be with us today and share your decades of experience with our listeners.
It's been a pleasure.
This podcast is for informational purposes only. The podcast is not intended as a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. You should not use the information on the podcast for diagnosing or treating a health problem or disease, or prescribing any medication or other treatment. Always seek the advice of your physician or other qualified health provider before taking any medication or nutritional, herbal, or homeopathic supplement, and with any questions you may have regarding a medical condition. Never disregard professional medical advice or delay in seeking it because of something you have heard on this or any other podcast. Reliance on the podcast is solely at your own risk. Information provided on the podcast does not create a doctor-patient relationship between you and any of the health professionals affiliated with our podcast. Information and statements regarding dietary supplements have not been evaluated by the Food and Drug Administration and are not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease. Opinions of guests are their own, and this podcast does not endorse or accept responsibility for statements made by guests. This podcast does not make any representations or warranties about guest qualifications or credibility. Individuals on this podcast may have a direct or indirect financial interest in products or services referred to therein. If you think you have a medical problem, consult a licensed physician.